Need to set this boundary because there's this specific issue in my life that can no longer continue. You let me know if you think the same thing, but I feel like there comes a point with a lot of Christians where we either become people pleasers or struggle with setting boundaries for some reason. I don't know where the idea comes from because it's not in the Word of God. And this is something that I used to struggle with a ton. So in this video, I'm just going to show you the formula that I use to break out of that mindset in order to set boundaries without compromising God's truth. Now, this formula was birthed out of a lot of trial and error of me attempting to set boundaries, attempting to break out of people pleasing, but I boiled it down to 3 basic steps. In Luke chapter 5, after Jesus finished healing a leper, starting at verse 15, it says, "But now even more the report about him went abroad, and crowds gathered to hear him and to be healed of their infirmities. But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray." Now, one of the things Jesus is demonstrating here is his ability to set boundaries, not only with other people, but also with himself, to not allow himself to go beyond what he was able to pour out at that given moment. Jesus didn't sit there and allow people to just take. He didn't just give without making sure that his cup was full as well. He was demonstrating what we ought to be doing in our own lives. When you're looking to set a boundary, the first and most important thing you can do is to identify the issue. And the reason this is the first step is because in order to even create a boundary, you need to be able to understand why that boundary needs to be put in place to begin with. If you were to go to the doctor, you would have a specific problem that you'll be telling the doctor about that you expect the doctor to solve. And from that problem, the doctor is going to come up with a specific treatment plan in order to help ease or get rid of that issue. So likewise, when we're creating a boundary, we need to be specific with exactly the issue is in order to make sure that we're creating a boundary that's fit for that issue. And having that specific issue in mind is going to help you with following through, because then you're going to make the connection. Okay, I need to set this boundary because there's this specific issue in my life that can no longer continue. Now, the second part to this process is actually creating the boundary. But there are 3 main principles to keep in mind when it comes to actually creating that boundary. The first one is going to be that boundaries don't look the same for everyone, and boundaries don't look the same for everything. For example, if I don't want my best friend coming into my house anytime he wants, that's a boundary that's going to be set in a different kind of way. And that's a boundary that may be something called a soft boundary, where I'm like, yo, I don't like when you do this, just make sure you knock or make sure you give me a text or something like that. However, a boundary a manager will need to set with his subordinate may be something completely different because of the type of relationship. So what I want you to take out of those 2 examples is that boundaries vary, and that boundaries vary from person to person and from situation to situation. Use your discretion and wisdom from above to determine what boundary exactly needs to be set. Now, the third part of this process, in my opinion, is the most important, is to determine some sort of consequence or result if that boundary is crossed. And the reason I say this is the most important, or in my opinion is the most important, is because I find that this is where I used to fail a lot, and I know a lot of people fail a lot, because we can somewhat get to setting a boundary of telling someone, hey, I'm not cool with this, can you please not do this? Or communicating that in some way or some fashion, right? But I notice a lot of the problems start with if that person does indeed cross that boundary, because then we go right back to square one. The reality is that some people will respect your boundaries and some people won't. The same way, if there's a fence that says do not trespass, now a lot of people are not going to cross that fence if it says do not trespass. They're going to leave it at that. However, there are some people that are going to hop that fence. So if someone hops that fence with the boundary that you set, there needs to be something in place to let that person know, hey, this is not cool. I told you this isn't cool, and this is how we're going to move forward. And again, just like with the last point, this doesn't have to be anything crazy, and this depends on the situation you're dealing with. Consequences that I've put in place was simply me separating from someone, or me distancing myself from someone, or them not having as much access to me, right? Where they're, instead of being my best friend, they're just an acquaintance now. Something like that. I feel like oftentimes with our boundaries being crossed, especially with the culture we live in, we go straight to cutting people off. We go straight to, doing these things that are of the world, that don't leave any kind of room for forgiveness and don't leave any kind of room for grace. Now, grace doesn't mean that you're meant to be walked over, but grace nevertheless should be present. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments how this has helped you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and be sure to check out that free people-pleasing checklist down below in the description. Remember, you got this because God's got you. Peace out.